As we all know, World War I was one of the most devastating wars in human history. Millions of men died in this war, and it changed the world forever. But what if I told you that this war also changed the game when it comes to innovations? That's right. During this war, many things were invented that we take for granted today. So in this video, I will show you 5 things invented because of World War I that changed the game. And I guarantee that at least one of these inventions you didn't expect. The first thing that was invented because of World War I is the machine gun. We all know that the machine gun is an extremely powerful weapon that can change the outcome of any battle. But what many people do and know is that the machine gun was actually invented during World War I. Before World War I, the most common weapon used by soldiers was the rifle. But as the war dragged on and the casualties mounted, it became clear that something needed to be done to protect the soldiers. In response, the British War Office set about developing a new weapon that would be more effective than a rifle, but easier to carry than a cannon. The result was the first machine gun, which was a huge success. Machine guns were used extensively throughout the rest of the war, and have been a staple of military forces ever since. The second thing that was invented because of World War I is poison gas. As we all know, poison gas is a very dangerous substance that can kill or injure large numbers of people. But what many people do and know is that poison gas was actually invented during World War I. The first poison gas was used by the Germans, who released it on the unsuspecting French troops in 1915. The gas was a mixture of different chemicals that created a cloud of deadly fumes. These fumes were so poisonous that they could burn the lungs and make it difficult to breathe. Needless to say, the French troops were caught off guard and suffered heavy casualties. This led to the development of gas masks, which were then used by both sides throughout the rest of the war. The third thing that was invented because of World War I is tanks. Tanks are now one of the most important weapons in any army's arsenal. But before World War I, they were unheard of. In fact, the first tank was designed by the British in 1916 in response to the stalemate that had developed on the Western Front. The British had been fighting against the Germans for 2 years with little success. They needed a weapon that could break through the enemy's trenches and reach their soldiers. What they came up with was a vehicle that was designed to look like a large metal box with a gun mounted on top. The British called it the tank, and it was an instant success. Tanks were able to break through enemy lines and wreak havoc on their soldiers. This led to the development of even more advanced tanks, which were then used extensively throughout the rest of the war. The fourth thing that was invented because of World War I is radar. Radar is now used for everything from air traffic control to weather forecasting. But did you know that it was first developed because of World War I? That's right. The first radar system was developed by the British in 1935 in response to the threat posed by Nazi Germany. The British knew that the Germans would eventually invade Britain, and they needed a way to detect them coming. So they developed a system that used radio waves to track the movement of objects. This system was so successful that it was used extensively throughout the war and is still in use today. The fifth thing that was invented because of World War I is the helicopter. Helicopters are now commonplace, but before World War I, they were a thing of myth. In fact, the first helicopter wasn't invented until 1907 by the Russian engineer Igor Sikorsky. However, it wasn't until World War I that helicopters really started to take off. The British and French were the first to use helicopters in combat, and they were primarily used for reconnaissance missions. The Germans were not far behind, though, and soon developed their own helicopter unit. By the end of the war, there were over 100 helicopters in service with various countries, and they had proven to be effective machines. It was clear that helicopters had a bright future ahead of them. Another thing that was invented because of World War I is airplanes. Airplanes have revolutionized the way we travel and do business. But what many people do and know is that airplanes were actually invented during World War I. The first airplane was invented by the Wright brothers in 1903, but it was in TO until World War I that airplanes really started to be used. The Germans and the British were the first to use airplanes in combat, and they were primarily used for reconnaissance missions. But as the war went on, airplanes became more and more important. In fact, by the end of the war, there were over 20,000 airplanes being used by all of the different countries involved. And it was clear that airplanes were here to stay. Another thing that was invented because of World War I is the submarine. Subs have become a staple of modern navies around the world. But what many people do and know is that subs were actually invented during World War I. The first submarine was invented by the Dutch inventor, Cornelius Drebbel, in 1620, but it was unteamed. Until World War I that submarines really started to be used. The Germans were the first to use submarines in combat, and they were primarily used to attack shipping lanes. The British were not far behind though, and soon developed their own submarine fleet. By the end of the war, there were over 300 submarines being used by all of the different countries involved. And it was clear that submarines were here to stay. And lastly, another thing that was invented because of World War I is the AK-47. The AK-47 is one of the most popular rifles of all time. But what many people do and know is that it was actually invented because of World War I. So there you have it. 5 things that were invented because of World War I that changed the game. Did you know about these inventions before? Which invention do you think is the most important? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one, and I'll see you next time.